Hello everyone, this is Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and tonight we are going to study paper 160, Rodan of Alexandria. I had to look, I've been editing so many papers I can't remember where I'm at. Rodan of Alexandria, and that begins on page 1772 in the old book, or paper 160.
I put a bit of highlighting in this one, because I read this one February 13th of 2013.
Oh, okay.
That's been a while.
No. No, it's the smaller battery, dude. There you go. I just tested it this afternoon.
In my book, on Sunday morning, September 18, above 18, I had 16.
Well, this is on Sunday morning, September 18th.
I have a 16 written above it. Why did I go correct it?
You probably did it on the 16th.
We may have done it in 2016. That was 2 years ago. Yeah. Why would we do Rodan of Alexandria for 2 years ago?
Okay.
We were doing very good. Yeah, but the last time we did it was long ago, 11, like 2011.
Well, you and I did it together.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay, well, let's get started. Hi, Rodney. Let's get
This was 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Almost, it was February of 2013.
13, yeah, that sounds about right. That was probably when we did it last. All right. Paper 160, Rodan of Alexandria. Let me make sure I got that thing recorded. Y'all bear with me a second. Yes, it is. Okay. A little red light coming on. Okay. On Sunday morning, September 18th, Andrew announced that no work would be planned for the coming week. All of the apostles except Nathanael and Thomas went home to visit their families or to sojourn with friends. This week, Jesus enjoyed a period of almost complete rest, but Nathanael and Thomas were very busy with their discussions with a certain Greek philosopher from Alexandria named Rodan. This Greek had recently become a disciple of Jesus through the teaching of one of Abner's associates who had conducted a mission at Alexandria. Rodan was now earnestly engaged in the task of harmonizing his philosophy of life with Jesus' new religious teachings. And he had come to Magadan hoping that the master would talk these problems over with him. He also desired to secure a first-hand and authoritative version of the gospel from either Jesus or one of his apostles. Though the master declined to enter into such a conference with Rodan, he did receive him graciously and immediately directed that Nathanael and Thomas should listen to all he had to say and tell him about the gospel in return. Now, before we read this, there might be an interesting point y'all might want to hear. First, Abner, of course, was the head of John the Baptist's apostles, right? And he ended up going to Philadelphia, and they were the closest to keeping to the gospel of Jesus after the death of Jesus, right? Philadelphia. But the trip to Alexandria, which started this with Rodan, was one of his teachers. And Rodan ended up training 30 disciples. And what's interesting is these 30 disciples are the 30 Greek disciples that were at the Garden of Gethsemane right before the death of Jesus. And Jesus was a mind to actually ordain these 30. the day before he was arrested, okay? Which they mention in the paper on right before the crucifixion. So I thought that was an interesting thing. So what's interesting is that by converting Rodan, he immediately started teaching disciples about the gospel, and his disciples spread out and become fruitful just from his teachings. So that may be one of the reasons that there's two papers, the two papers we're fixing to read, about Rodan in the Urantia Book, okay? Because they do not spend this much time with any other person other than what Jesus did in the book outside of Melchizedek, right? So they must have thought that what he taught was very important, or there wouldn't be two papers on it. That's the point I wanted to make. So let's go.
So, Roger,
Yeah.
these 30 disciples, were they camped out at the garden that night?
They were camped out at that night when they came to arrest Jesus, okay? And it's interesting that when all this was going on, some of the Greeks were the ones that were guarded with weapons to protect Jesus, okay? They felt like that if there was going to be a conflict, that the Greeks would jump in and help protect Jesus along with David's messengers, okay? So, when they realized that that's not what the master wanted, then they stepped back and didn't do anything, like they should have, or they would have, I should say. But it's interesting that Jesus was ready to ordain these 30 disciples as messengers of the kingdom, as ordained messengers of the kingdom. And it's also interesting that these 30 Greeks probably went on and, just like the apostles, if not even better than the apostles, teaching the gospel right after the death of Christ, right? Because they were not afraid of the Sanhedrin, were they? Because they were Greeks, they weren't Jews. So it's just kind of an interesting side note, of the way things happened right before the crucifixion.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So when they, it says, and tell him about the gospel in return.
Right.
What do you think they told him?
Well, that's what I find interesting about this paper is it doesn't really say, does it, in this paper what they said in return to him, other than that they were convincing him that Christ was the Son of God and they were teaching him the gospel. The other thing is this. Rodan was a philosopher, right? He wasn't a religious teacher. And so this philosopher from Alexandria, to be converted to part of the gospel, was a major win for the gospel, if you think about it. Because until he died, he actually taught the gospel in place of his own philosophy, right? Or mixed in with his own philosophy. Because you're going to see from this paper, this man was very intelligent. Very intelligent. He wasn't your typical run-of-the-mill guy running around that didn't know anything. He's very intelligent. So let's go ahead.
So one more thing.
Yeah.
But we know the gospel, which is also a word for truth.
Right.
The gospel is the fatherhood of God, brotherhood of man.
Right.
It's just that simple, right?
Pretty simple message. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
But the interesting thing, Rodney, is Rodan added to this simple message his philosophy of living and how you live that fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man, right?
Okay.
All right. So let's move on to the next. All right. Lily's the next in line here, so I can keep my head straight. Let's let Lily go on in here, okay? Lily, would you take the next one?
Yes. Rodin's Greek philosophy. Early Monday morning, Rodin began a series of 10 addresses to Nathaniel, Thomas, and a group of some 24 believers who chanced to be at Magnon. These talks, condensed, combined, and restated in modern phraseology, present the following thoughts for consideration.
Notice that they're saying for your consideration. So they thought these were important enough to put in the book, which I think is quite unusual. Right.
Human life consists of three great drives: urges, desires, and lures. Strong character, commanding personality, is only acquired by converting the natural urge of life into the social art of living, by transforming present desires into those higher longings which are capable of lasting attainment, while the commonplace lure of existence must be transferred from one conventional and established ideals to the higher realms of unexplored ideas and undiscovered ideals.
Is this not part of being born again? What Jesus talks about being born again, having a new life. And that's what Rodan starts out with. Your normal human life, when you become a believer, really, is transferring your thoughts and urges and desires into a new lasting thing that will build your character, right? From then on out. So it's really the art of being born again, right? All right. Stephen.
Okay. The more complex the civilization becomes, the more difficult will become the art of living. The more rapid the changes in social usage, the more complicated will become the task of character development. Every 10 generations, mankind must learn anew the art of living if progress is to continue. And if man becomes so ingenious that he more rapidly adds to the complexity of society, the art of living will need to be remastered in less time. Perhaps every single generation. If the evolution of the art of living fails to keep pace with the technique of existence, humanity will quickly revert to the simple urge of living, the attainment of the satisfaction of present desire. Thus will humanity remain immature. Society will fail in growing up to full maturity.
Can you all see how this is happening in our generation now? We have lost the art of living, and we've replaced that with what? Living our desires, right? Becoming materialistic, right? Everything is materialistic. Everything is sex. Everything is money. Everything is attaining things. And so we have lost that concept of the art of living and building a religious base in philosophy and morals in our life. And that's what he's talking about. And what he's saying here is if we stay on that course, that we will have to relearn every single generation these concepts that we are teaching right now, right? That we're trying to teach people. The morality and things like that, right? All right.
I really pray for our next generation.
That's exactly right. Okay. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Social maturity is equivalent to the degree to which man is willing to surrender the gratification of mere transient and present desires for the entertainment of those superior longings, the striving for whose attainment affords the more abundant satisfactions of progressive advancement toward permanent goals. Be the true badge of society, of social maturity, is the willingness of a people to surrender the right to live peacefully and contentedly under the peace-promoting standards of the lure of established beliefs and conventional ideas for the disquieting and energy requiring lure of the pursuit of the unexplored possibilities of the attainment of undiscovered goals of idealistic spiritual realities.
So discovering the goals of spiritual reality is the harder way to go, right? It's easy in this day and age to live the materialistic lifestyle. It's easy to go out and earn a living and make lots of money and have lots of things, right? But to replace that with a social maturity and a willingness to give that up, to have peace and contentment as a spiritual reality is hard, okay? And that's why we just don't step right straight into it. And that's why the direction of moving into light and life is going to be a hard and difficult road to hoe, right? All right. Let's see what next. Animals respond nobly to the urge of life, but only man can attain the art of living. I'll bet the majority of mankind only experience the animal urge to live. Animals know only this blind and instinctive urge. Man is capable of transcending this urge to natural function. Man may elect to live upon a high plane of intelligent art, even that of a celestial joy and spiritual ecstasy. Animals make no inquiry into the purpose of life. Therefore, they never worry. Neither do they commit suicide. Suicide among men testifies that such beings have emerged from the purely animal stage of existence and to the further fact that the exploratory effort of such human beings have failed to attain the artistic levels of mortal experience. Animals know not the meaning of life. Man not only possesses capacity for the recognition of values and the comprehension of meanings, but he also is conscious of the meaning of meanings. He is self-conscious of insight. Isn't it interesting here they bring up suicide? Why is it that animals do not commit suicide? They don't evaluate their own personal beings, do they? Only human beings do that, and only human beings become disgusted with themselves and their lives, because only human beings are self-reflective, okay? And that's why this is important, that we understand this. So when we move from the animalistic response,
Psychological.
Yes, that's exactly right. When you move from the animal response to a spiritual response, your whole being changes, right? All right? It's what separates us from the animals. Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
When men dare to forsake a life of natural craving for one of adventurous art and uncertain logic, they must expect to suffer the consequent hazards of emotional casualty, conflicts, unhappiness, and uncertainties, at least until the time of their attainment of some degree of intellectual and emotional maturity. Discouragement, worry, and indolence are positive evidence of moral immaturity. Human society is confronted with two problems: attainment of the maturity of the individual and attainment of the maturity of the race. The mature human will soon begin, the mature human being soon begins to look upon all other mortals with feelings of tenderness and with emotions of tolerance. Mature men view immature folks with love and consideration that parents bear their children.
Because of wisdom, they understand what they're going through, right? And they understand where they're coming from, right?
Successful living is nothing more or less than the art of mastery of dependable techniques for solving common problems. The first step in the solution of any problem is to locate the difficulty, to isolate the problem, and frankly to recognize its nature and gravity. The great mistake is that when life problems excite our profound fears, we refuse to recognize them. Likewise, when the acknowledgement of our difficulties entails the reduction of our long-cherished conceit, the admission of envy, or the abandonment of deep-seated prejudices, the average person prefers to cling to the old illusions of of safety and to the long-cherished false feelings of security. Only a brave person is willing honestly to admit and fearlessly to face what a sincere and logical mind discovers.
So it has to do with being brave, doesn't it? Stephen.
Okay. Wise and effective solution to any problem demands that the mind should be free from bias, passion, and all other purely personal prejudices which might interfere with the disinterested survey of the actual factors that go on to make up the problem presenting itself for solution. The solution of life problem requires courage and sincerity. Only honest and brave individuals are able to follow valiantly through the perplexing and confusing maze of living to where the logic of a fearless mind may lead. And this emancipation of the mind and soul can never be effected without the driving power of an intelligent enthusiasm which borders on religious zeal. It requires the lure of a great ideal to drive man on in the pursuit of a goal which is beset with difficult material problems and manifold intellectual hazards.
So it's the higher intellect that helps us do this, doesn't it? And it is it's a job to work through these problems. There's no way around this, right? And it, like he says here, it has hazards, manifold intellectual hazards in doing so, right? Rodney.
Even though you are effectively armed to meet the difficult situations of life, you can hardly expect this unless you are equipped with that wisdom of mind and charm of personality which enable you to win the hearty support and cooperation of your fellows. You cannot hope for a large measure of success in either secular or religious work unless you can learn how to persuade your fellows to prevail with them, with men. You simply must have tact and tolerance.
All right. Words of wisdom, right? Tact and tolerance. It's hard for a lot of us. All right. But the greatest of all these methods of problem solving I have learned from Jesus, your master. I refer to that which he so consistently practices and which he so faithfully taught you, the isolation of worshipful meditation. In this habit of Jesus going off so frequently by himself to commune with the Father in heaven is to be found the technique not only for gathering strength and wisdom for the ordinary conflicts of living, but also of appropriating the energy for the solution of the higher problems of a moral and spiritual nature. But even correct methods of solving problems will not compensate for inherent defects of personality or atone for the absence of the hunger and thirst for true righteousness. You have to want it. It has to be a goal in your life. It has to be something you go after, right? Millie?
Yes. I am deeply impressed with the custom of Jesus in going apart by himself to engage in these seasons of solitary survey of the problems of living, to seek for new stores of wisdom and energy for meeting the manifold demands of social service, to quicken and deepen the supreme purpose of living by actually subjecting the total personality to the subconsciousness of contacting the divinity, to grasp or possession of a new and better method of adjusting oneself to the ever-changing situations of living existence, to effect those vital reconstructions and readjustments of one's personal attitudes, which are so essential to enhance insight into everything worthwhile and real, and to do all of this with an eye single to the glory of God, to breathe in sincerity your master's favorite prayer, not my will, but yours be done.
giving us a roadmap, isn't he, to getting there. Okay?
This worshipful practice of your master brings that relaxation which renews the mind, that elimination which inspires the soul, that courage which enables one bravely to face one's problems, that self-understanding which obliterates debilitating fear, and that consciousness of union with divinity, which equips man with the assurance that enables him to dare to be godlike. The relaxation of worship or spiritual communion, as practiced by the Master, relieves tension, removes conflicts, and mightily augments the total resources of the personality. And all this philosophy, plus the gospel of the kingdom, constitutes a new religion as I understand it.
That's a pretty good understanding. That's a picture of, oops. This is the picture of Jesus going off by himself and contemplating and meditating. Stephen.
Okay. Prejudice blinds the soul to the recognition of truth, and prejudice can be removed only by the sincere devotion of the soul to the adoration of a cause that is all-embracing and all-inclusive of one's fellow men. Prejudice is inseparably linked to selfishness. Prejudice can be eliminated only by the abandonment of self-seeking and by substituting, therefore, the quest of the satisfaction of the service of a cause that is not only greater than self, but one that is even greater than all humanity. The search for God, the attainment of divinity, the evidence of maturity, of personality, consists in the transformation of human desire so that it constantly seeks for the realization of those values which are highest and most divinely sealed.
So even back then, the church and the men of the church and people of that time were dealing with the same human prejudices that we deal with today, because people are always different, right? And it's the same story today as it was back then. So this is kind of our roadmap to dealing with prejudices and becoming more divinely led, right? All right. Rodney.
In a continually changing world, in the midst of an evolving social order, it is impossible to maintain settled and established goals of destiny. Stability of personality can be experienced only by those who have discovered and embraced the living God as the eternal goal of infinite attainment, and thus to transfer one's goal from time to eternity, from earth to paradise, from the human to the divine, requires that man shall become regenerated, converted, be born again, that he shall become the recreated child of the divine spirit, that he shall gain entrance into the brotherhood of the kingdom of heaven. All philosophies and religions which fall short of these ideals are immature. The philosophy which I teach, linked with the gospel which you preach, represents the new religion of maturity, the ideal of all future generations. And this is true because our ideal is final, infallible, eternal, universal, absolute, and infinite.
What is he talking about here? The kingdom of heaven, the spiritual brotherhood of the kingdom of heaven, right? The fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. It's a spiritual message. It's a spiritual brotherhood. The kingdom of God is the spiritual realization that we're all brothers and sisters, regardless of race, color, all these other things. And that's what this is all coming down to, right? And he's saying here that what we teach is a new religion of maturity, and it is. And all other religions that don't embrace these thoughts are what? Are outmoded, right? Immature. They don't have any base anymore, right? And that's why this concept is so important, right? All right. My philosophy gave me the urge to search for the realities of true attainment, the goal of maturity. But my urge was impotent. My searching lacked driving power. My quest suffered from the absence of certainty of direction. And these deficiencies have been abundantly supplied by this new gospel of Jesus, with its enhancement of insights, elevation of ideals, and settledness of goals. Without doubts and misgivings, I can now wholeheartedly enter upon the eternal venture. Ooh, isn't that beautiful? Can't say it better than that. All right. Millie, would you take the next one?
I have a wonderful chiropractor whose chiropractic offices are entitled The Art of Living.
Yeah.
Number 2, The Art of Living. There are just 2 ways in which mortals may live together: the material or animal way, and the spiritual or human way. By the use of signals and sounds, animals are able to communicate with each other in a limited way. But such forms of communication do not convey meanings, values, or ideas. The one distinction between man and the animal is that man can communicate with his fellows by means of symbols, which most certainly designate and identify meanings, values, ideas, and even ideals.
So this is more of what makes us different than the animals, right? At least we hope so. All right. Diane.
Since animals cannot communicate ideas to each other, they cannot develop personality. Man develops personality because he can thus communicate with his fellows concerning both ideas and ideals.
Stephen, would you take the next one?
Okay. It is this ability to communicate and share meanings that constitutes human culture and enables man, through social associations, to build civilization. Knowledge and wisdom become cumulative because of man's ability to communicate these possessions to succeeding generations, and thereby rise the cultural activities of race, art, science, religion, and philosophy.
Why do you think in Egypt there are so many hieroglyphs and things like this on all the walls and everything? They're trying to relate to future generations the knowledge they have learned till that point. Okay? So that's their way of assuring that the knowledge they had is transposed or passed on from generation to generation. And so that's what we have learned to do with our science, religion, and philosophy. We've learned to pass on our cultural activities, everything that we've learned as far as art, race, and religion, philosophy, on to the next generation, hopefully. And it makes it easier for them to learn, and it should take them less time. Now, when we get into this materialistic way that we are right now, we suffer because we don't do that as much, right? All right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
Symbolic communication between human beings predetermines the bringing into existence of social groups. The most effective of all social groups is the family, more particularly the 2 parents. Personal affection is the spiritual bond which holds together these material associations. Such an effective relationship is also possible between 2 persons of the same sex, as is so abundantly illustrated in the devotions of genuine friendships.
All right. It doesn't have to be a man and a woman, it could be two people of the same sex also, right? All right. These associations of friendship and mutual affection are socializing and ennobling because they encourage and facilitate the following essential factors of the higher levels of the art of living. You get along with there, Billy. Turn your mic back on, Billy. There you go.
It sends me a little note saying you are muted.
Yeah.
Mutual self-expression and self-understanding. Many noble human impulses die because there is no one to hear their expression. Truly, it is not good for man to be alone. Some degree of recognition and a certain amount of apprehension, appreciation are essential to the development of the human character. Without the genuine love of a home, no child can achieve the full development of normal character. Character is something more than mere mind and morals. Of all social relations calculated to develop character, the most effective and ideal is the affectionate and understanding friendship of man and woman in the mutual embrace of intelligent wedlock. Marriage, with its manifold relations, is best designed to draw forth those precious impulses and those higher motives which are indispensable to the development of a strong character. I do not hesitate thus to glorify family life, for your master has wisely chosen the father-child relationship as the very cornerstone of his new gospel of the kingdom. And such a matchless community of relationship, man and woman in the fond embraces of the highest ideals of time, is so valuable and satisfying as an experience that it is worth any price, any sacrifice requisite for its possession.
That's why they consider marriage the most important relationships on earth, right? And
2. Union of souls, the mobilization of wisdom. Every human being sooner or later acquires a certain concept of this world and a certain vision of the next. Now it is possible through personality association to unite these views of temporal existence and eternal prospects. Thus does the mind of one augment its spiritual values by gaining much of the insight of the other. In this way, men enrich the soul of pooling their respective spiritual possessions. Likewise, in the same way, man is enabled to avoid that ever-present tendency to fall victim to distortion of vision, prejudice of viewpoint, and narrowness of judgment. Fear, envy, and conceit can be prevented only by intimate contact with other minds. I call your attention to the fact that the Master never sends you out alone to labor for the extension of the kingdom. He always sends you out 2 by 2 and 2. And since wisdom is super knowledge, it follows that in the union of wisdom, the social group, small or large, mutually shares all knowledge.
very interesting. Stephen, would you take 3, please?
Okay. Enthusiasm for living, isolation tends to exhaust the energy charge of the soul. Association with one's fellow is essential to the renewal of the zest for life and is indispensable to the maintenance of the courage to fight those battles consequent upon the ascent to the higher levels of human living. Friendship enhances the joys and glorifies the triumphs of life. Loving and intimate human associations tend to rob suffering of its sorrow and hardship of much of its bitterness. The presence of a friend enhances all beauty and exalts every goodness. By intelligent symbols, man is able to quicken and enlarge the appreciative capacity of his friends. One of the crowning glories of human friendship is this power and possibility of the mutual stimulation of the imagination. Great spiritual power is inherent in the consciousness of wholehearted devotion to a common cause, mutual loyalty to a cosmic deity.
That's self-explanatory. Rodney.
Third, the enhanced defense against all evil. Personality association and mutual affection is an efficient insurance against evil, difficulties, sorrow, disappointment, and defeat are painful and disheartening when born alone. Association does not transmute evil into righteousness, but it does aid in greatly lessening esteem. Said your master, happy for they who mourn. If a friend is at hand to comfort, there is positive strength in the knowledge that you live welfare of others, and that these others likewise live for your welfare and advancement. Man languishes in isolation. Human beings unfailingly become discouraged, and they view only the transitory transactions of time. The present, when divorced from the past and the future, becomes
Exasperating. Trivial.
Trivial. Only a glimpse of the circle of eternity will inspire man to do his best and can challenge the best in him to do its utmost. And when man is thus at his best, he lives most unselfishly for the good of others, his fellow sojourners in time and eternity.
So if you live in isolation, it's hard to do all these things, doesn't it? It's by the association of other people that we help bear our difficulties, our sorrows, and our disappointments, our defeats in life, and anything that's disheartening as we go through life. If you have someone to share that with, or friends to share that with, or a mate to share that with, it takes away the sting of life, right? Makes it more bearable. There's just no way around it. Right? Not good for people to be alone. I repeat, such inspiring and ennobling association find its ideal possibilities in the human marriage relation. True, much is attained out of marriage, and many, many marriages utterly fail to produce these moral and spiritual fruits. Too many times marriage is entered by those who seek other values which are lower than the superior accompaniments of human maturity. Ideal marriage must be founded on something more stable than the fluctuations of sentiment and the fickleness of mere sex attraction. It must be based on genuine and mutual personal devotion. And thus, if you can build up such trustworthy and effective small units of human association, when these are assembled in the aggregate, the world will become a great and glorified social structure, the civilization of mortal maturity. Such a race might begin to realize something of your Master's ideal of peace on earth and goodwill among men. While such a society would not be perfect or entirely free from evil, it would at least approach the stabilization of maturity. Pretty wise, isn't it? Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes. Excuse me. The lures of maturity. The effort toward maturity necessitates work, and work requires energy. Whence the power to accomplish all of this? The physical things can be taken for granted, but the Master has well said, man cannot live by bread alone. Granted the possession of a normal body and reasonably good health, we must next look for those lures which will act as a stimulus to call forth men's slumbering spiritual forces. Jesus has taught us that God lives in man. Then how induce men to let go of God, that he may spring forth to the refreshment of our own souls, while in transit outward and then to serve the purpose of enlightening, uplifting, and blessing countless other souls. How best can I awaken these latent powers for good which lie dormant in your souls? One thing I'm sure of, emotional excitement is not the ideal spiritual stimulus. Excitement does not augment energy. It rather exhausts the powers of both mind and body. Whence then comes the energy to do these great things? To your master, even now, he is out in the hills, taking in power, while we are here giving out energy. The secret of all this, problem is wrapped up in spiritual communion, in worship. From the human standpoint, it is a question of combined meditation and relaxation. Meditation makes the contact of mind with spirit. Relaxation determines the capacity for spiritual receptivity. And this interchange of strength for weakness, courage for fear, the will of God for the mind of self, constitutes worship. At least, that is the way the philosopher views it.
Okay, so through worship and communion with God, we recharge our batteries, our spiritual batteries, right? And that is what gives us the energy to take these problems on in life, right? Diane?
When these experiences are frequently repeated, they crystallize into habits, strength-giving and worshipful habits, and such habits eventually formulate themselves into a spiritual character, and such a character is finally recognized by one's fellows as a mature personality. These practices are difficult and time-consuming at first, but when they become habitual, they are at once restful and time-saving. The more complex society becomes and the more the lures of civilization multiply, the more urgent will become the necessity for God-knowing individuals to form such protective habitual practices designed to conserve and augment their spiritual energies.
It's almost like he's talking about, he looked into the future, didn't he? All right. Stephen, will you take the next one?
Okay. Another requirement for the attainment of maturity is the cooperative adjustment of social groups to an ever-changing environment. The immature individual arouses the antagonism of his fellow. The mature man wins the hearty cooperation of his associates, thereby many times multiplying the fruits of his life's efforts.
All right. Cooperative adjustment to social group maturity. Interesting. Rod.
My philosophy tells me that there are times when I must fight, if need be, for the defense of my concept of righteousness. But I doubt not that the master, with a more mature type of personality, would easily and gracefully gain an equal victory by his superior and winsome technique of tact and tolerance. All too often, when we battle for the right, it turns out that both the victor and the vanquished have sustained. I heard the master say only yesterday that the wise man, when seeking entrance through the locked door, would not destroy the door, but rather would seek for the key wherewith to unlock it. Too often we engage in a fight merely to convince ourselves that we are not afraid.
And force is not always the best way, right? And that goes for spiritual force too. That goes for mental force too. Sometimes you can't force your ideas on people, because sometimes it's like trying to break down the locked door instead of finding the key that will open up those concepts for folks, right? This new gospel of the kingdom renders a great service to the art of living in that it supplies a new and richer incentive for higher living. represents a new and exalted goal of destiny, a supreme life purpose. And these new concepts of the eternal and divine goal of existence are in themselves transcendent stimuli, calling forth the reaction of the very best that is resident in man's higher nature. On every mountaintop of intellectual thought are to be found relaxation for the mind and strength for the soul, and communion for the spirit. From such vantage points of high living, man is able to transcend the material irritations of the lower levels of thinking, worry, jealousy, envy, revenge, and the pride of immature personality. These high-climbing souls deliver themselves from a multitude of the cross-current conflicts of the trifles of living, thus becoming free to attain consciousness of the higher currents of the spirit, concept, and celestial communication. But life purpose must be jealously guarded from the temptation to seek for easy and transient attainment. Likewise, must it be so fostered as to become immune to the disastrous creeps of fanaticism. Threats of fanaticism. Millie.
Number 4, the balance of maturity. While you have an eye single to the attainment of eternal realities, you must also make provision for the necessities of temporal living. While the spirit is our goal, the flesh is the fact. Occasionally, the necessities of living may fall into our hands by accident, but in general, we must intelligently work for them. The two major problems of life are making a temporal living and the achievement of eternal survival. And even the problem of making a living requires religion for its ideal solution. And even the problem of making a living requires a religion for its ideal solution. That's interesting.
Yeah.
These are both highly personal problems. True religion, in fact, does not function apart from the individual.
So, when you have a job and you're out there working and making money, you have to instill your religious concept in making your living also. That's what what living is about, right? Living your goals and living your understanding of what your religious concepts are, right?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
The essentials of a temporal life, as I see them, are 1. Good physical health. 2. Clear and clean thinking. 3. Ability and skill. 4. Wealth, the goods of life. 5. The ability to withstand defeat. 6. Culture, education, and wisdom.
Okay, and that's just the essentials. That's not extras, right? Steve.
All right. Even the physical problems of bodily health and efficiency are best solved when they are viewed from the religious standpoint of our Master's teachings, that the body, mind of men are the dwelling place of the gift of the gods, the Spirit of God, becoming the spirit of man. The mind of man thus becomes the mediator between material things and spiritual realities.
So if you think about it, we are really the custodian of the vessel for God the Father to live in. You think about it that way, right? So as custodians, if we don't take care of our own body and keep our minds and spirits clear and moral, then we're destroying the temple in which God is trying to provide us spiritual value in, right? So it's very important that we stay healthy and clear, right? Rodney.
Okay. It requires intelligence to secure one's share of the desirable things of life. It is wholly erroneous to suppose that faithfulness in doing one's daily work will ensure the rewards of wealth. foreign the association and accidental acquirement of wealth, the material rewards of the temporal life are found to flow in certain well-organized channels, and only those who have access to these channels may expect to be well rewarded for their temporal efforts. Poverty must ever be the lot of all men who seek for wealth in isolated and individual channels. Wise planning, therefore, becomes the one thing essential to worldly prosperity. Success requires not only devotion to one's work, but also that one should function as a part of someone of the channels of material wealth. If you are unwise, you can bestow a devoted life upon your generation without material reward. If you are an accidental beneficiary of the flow of wealth, you may roll in luxury even though you have nothing worthwhile for your fellow men.
So you can be rich and never do the first thing that helps your fellow man or the fatherhood of God, right? And you can also remain as poor as possible and still do the work of God, right? So it works both ways. All right. Ability is that which you inherit, while skill is that which you acquire. Life is not real to one who cannot do some one thing well expertly. Skill is one of the real sources of the satisfaction of living. Ability implies the gift of foresight, far-seeing vision. Be not deceived by the tempting rewards of dishonest achievement. Be willing to toil for the later rewards inherent in honest endeavor. The wise man is able to distinguish between the means and ends. Otherwise, sometimes over-planning for the future defeats its own high purpose. As a pleasure seeker, you should aim always to be a producer as well as a consumer. Good advice from the father to a son, right? All right, Millie.
Train your memories to hold in sacred trust the strength given and worthwhile episodes of life, which you can recall at will for your pleasure and edification. Thus will for yourself and in yourself preserve galleries of beauty, goodness, and artistic grandeur. But the noblest of all memories are the treasured recollections of the great moments of a superb friendship. And all of these memory treasures radiate their most precious and exalting influence under the releasing touch of spiritual worship.
There you go. I could go on for hours about that one. Diane.
And life will become a burden of existence unless you learn how to fail gracefully. There is an art in defeat which noble souls always acquire. You must know how to lose cheerfully. You must be fearless of disappointment. Never hesitate to admit failure. Make no attempt to hide failure under deceptive smiles and beaming optimism. It sounds well always to claim success, but the end results are appalling. Such a technique leads directly to the creation of a world of unreality and to the inevitable crash of ultimate disillusionment.
And people that do that live in a world of unreality most of the time. Stephen.
All right. Success may generate courage and promote confidence, but wisdom comes only from the experience of adjustment to the results of one's day. Men who prefer optimistic illusion to reality can never become wise. Only those who face facts and adjust them to ideals can achieve wisdom. Wisdom embraces both the fact and the ideal, and therefore saves its devotee from both of those barren extremes of philosophy. The man whose idealism excludes facts and the materialist who is devoid of spiritual outlook Those timid souls who can only keep up the struggle of life by the aid of continuous false illusions of success are doomed to suffer failure and experience defeat as they ultimately awaken from the dream world of their own imaginations.
Con people, con men, right? You know, you can build up yourself and make yourself think that you're doing someone good by doing this, but you're not. It's just an interesting picture. Maybe stuck in there. All right, Rodney.
Wait, what was that picture of?
I'm not sure it was part of the, that one was part of the series in the encyclopedia Urantia, and I almost didn't put it in there, but I think this is supposed to be Jesus sitting on the side and this boat coming, but I'm not sure. It says down here, it's in French, it says, les illusions produced, and I don't speak French, so I don't know what it's supposed to be. But I stuck it in there anyway. For those that do speak French. You know.
Like Gilles.
Like Gilles.
Okay. And it is this business of facing failure and adjusting to defeat that the far-reaching vision of religion exerts its supreme. Failure is simply an educational episode, a cultural experiment in the acquirement of wisdom, in the experience of the God-seeking man who is embarked eternal adventure of the exploration of a universe. To such men, defeat is but a new tool for the achievement of higher levels of universe reality.
So what's this telling us? This is telling us that everything is transcendental, isn't it? It passes. As we go through this life, we have a lot of different experiences, and among those are some of our failures, right? The career of God-seeking man may prove to be the great success in the light of eternity, even though the whole temporal life enterprise may appear as an overwhelming failure, providing each life failure yielded the culture of wisdom and spirit achievement. Do not make the mistake of confusing knowledge, culture, and wisdom. They are related in life, but they represent vastly differing spiritual values. Wisdom ever dominates knowledge and ever glorifies culture. So we're looking for wisdom, right, in this world. Millie.
Number 5, the religion of the ideal. You have told me that your master regards genuine human religion as the individual's experience with spiritual realities. I have regarded religion as a man's experience of reacting to something which he regards as being worthy of the homage and devotion of all mankind. In this sense, religion symbolizes our supreme devotion to that which represents our highest concept of the ideals of reality and the farthest reach of our minds toward eternal possibilities of spiritual attainment.
When men react to religion in the tribal, national, or racial sense, it is because they look upon those without their group as not being truly human. We always look upon the object of our religious loyalty as being worthy of the reverence of all men. Religion can never be a matter of mere intellectual belief or philosophic reasoning. Religion is always and forever a mode of reacting to the situations of life. It is a species of conduct. Religion embraces thinking, feeling, and acting reverently towards some reality which we deem worthy of universal adoration.
And to us, that's the universal Father, right? Stephen.
Okay. If something has become a religion in your experience, it is self-evident that you already have become an active evangelist of that religion, since you deem the supreme concept of your religion as being worthy of all mankind. missionary evangel of your religion, you are self-deceived in that what you call religion is only a traditional belief or a mere system of intellectual philosophy. If your religion is a spiritual experience, your object of worship must be the universal spirit, reality, and ideal of all your spiritualized concepts. All religions based on fear, emotion, tradition, and philosophy, I term the intellectual religions, while those based on true spirit experience, I would term the true religions. The object of religious devotion may be material or spiritual, true or false, real or unreal, human or divine. Religions can therefore be either good or evil.
We can all understand how that can be, right?
Yes.
We've been involved with religions that weren't true. Rodney.
Morality and religion are not necessarily the same. A system of morals, by grasping an object of worship, may become a religion. A religion, by losing its universal appeal to loyalty and supreme devotion, may evolve into a system of philosophy or a code of morals. This thing, being state or order of existence or possibility of attainment, which constitutes the supreme ideal of religious loyalty, and which is the recipient of the religious devotion of those who worship, is God, regardless of the name applied to this ideal of spirit reality. It is God.
Any way you look at it, there's no way around that, right? All right. The social characteristics of a true religion consists in the fact that it invariably seeks to convert the individual and to transform the world. Religion implied the existence of undiscovered ideals which far transcend the known standards of ethics and morality embodied in even the highest social usages of the most mature institutions of civilization. Religion reaches out for undiscovered ideas, unexplored realities, superhuman values, divine wisdom, and true spirit attainment. True religion does all this. All other beliefs are not worthy of the name. You cannot have a genuine spiritual religion without the supreme and supernal ideal of an eternal God. A religion without this God is an invention of man, a human institution of lifeless, intellectual beliefs, of meaningless, emotional ceremonies. A religion might claim as the object of its devotion a great ideal, but such ideals of unreality are not attainable. Such a concept is illusionary. The only ideals susceptible of human attainment are the divine realities of the infinite values resident in the spiritual fact of the eternal God. In other words, if God isn't in it, it isn't really a true religion. Right? All right. Millie.
The Word of God, the idea of God, as contrasted with the ideal of God, can become a part of any religion, no matter how pure or false that religion may chance to be. And this idea of God can become anything which those who entertain it may choose to make it. The lower religions shape their ideas of God to meet the natural state of the human heart. The higher religions demand that the human heart shall be changed to meet the demands of the ideals of a true religion.
And that's why so many religions have different things as their gods too, right? There you go.
The religion of Jesus transcends all our former concepts of the idea of worship, in that he not only portrays his Father as the ideal infinite reality, but positively declares that this divine source of values and the eternal center of the universe is truly and personally attainable by every mortal creature who chooses to enter the kingdom of heaven on earth, thereby acknowledging the acceptance of sonship with God and brotherhood with man. That I submit is the highest concept of religion the world has ever known, and I pronounce that there can never be a higher since this gospel embraces the infinity of realities, divinity of values, and the eternity of universal attainments. Such a concept constitutes the achievement of the experience of the idealism of the supreme and the ultimate.
Amen.
Amen.
So be it.
Stephen, would you take the next one, please?
Okay. I am not only intrigued by the consummate ideals of this religion of your master, but I am mightily moved to profess my belief in his announcement that these ideals of spiritual realities are attainable, that you and I can enter upon this long and eternal adventure with his assurance of the certainty of our ultimate arrival at the portals of paradise. My brethren, I am a believer. I have embarked. I am on my way with you in this eternal venture. The Master says he came from the Father, and that he will show us the way. I am fully persuaded he speaks the truth. I am finally convinced that there are no attainable ideas of reality or values of perfection apart from the eternal and universal Father.
Is that not a witness or what? All right, Bradley, would you take the next one?
I come then to worship not merely the God of existences, but the God of the possibility of all future existences. Therefore must your devotion to the supreme ideal, if that ideal is real, be devotion to this God of past, present, and future universes of things and beings. And there is no other God, for there cannot possibly be any other God. All other gods are figments of the imagination, illusions of mortal mind, distortions of false logic, and the deceptive idols of those who create them. Yes, you can have a religion without this God, but it does not mean anything. And if you seek to substitute the word God for the reality of this ideal of the living God, you have only deluded yourself by putting an idea in the place of an ideal, a divine reality. Such beliefs are merely religions of wishful fancy.
Doesn't pull any punches on that one, does he? All right. I see in the teachings of Jesus religion at its best. The gospel enables us to seek for the true God and to find him. But are we willing to pay the price for this entrance into the kingdom of heaven? Are we willing to be born again? To be remade? Are we willing to be subject to this terrible and testing process of self-destruction and soul reconstruction? Has not the Master said, "Whoso would save his life must lose it. Think not that I have come to bring peace, but rather a soul struggle." True, after we pay the price of dedication to the Father's will, we do experience great peace, providing we continue to walk in these spiritual paths of consecrated living. Millie.
Now are we truly forsaking the lures of the known order of existence, while we unreservedly dedicate our quest to the lures of the unknown and unexplored order of the existence of a future life of adventure in the spirit worlds of the higher idealism of divine reality. And we seek for those symbols of meaning wherewith to convey to our fellow men these concepts of the reality of the idealism of the religion of Jesus. And we will not cease to pray for that day when all mankind shall be thrilled by the communal vision of this supreme truth. Just now, our focalized concept of the Father, as held in our hearts, is that God is spirit, as conveyed to our fellows that God is love.
The religion of Jesus demands living and spiritual experience. Other religions may consist of traditional beliefs, emotional feelings, philosophic consciousness, and all of that. But the teaching of the Master requires the attainment of actual levels of real spirit progression. Amen.
We must do something,
Yeah.
right?
And progress.
And progress. All right, Stephen.
Okay. Consciousness of the impulse to be like God is not true religion. The feelings of the emotion to worship God are not true religion. The knowledge and the conviction to forsake self and serve God is not true religion. The wisdom of the reasoning that this religion is the best of all is not religion as a personal and spiritual experience. True religion has reference to destiny and reality of attainment, as well as to the reality and idealism of that which is wholeheartedly faith accepted. And all of this must be made personal to us by the revelation of the Spirit of truth.
So it's conviction within ourselves, right? That's what it's about. And that's taught to us by the Spirit of truth, right? Roddy, would you take the last one, please?
And thus ended the dissertations of the Greek philosopher, one of the greatest of his race, who had become a believer in the gospel of Jesus.
Okay, and next time we'll take on the second half of the Papers of Rodan. I got a slide in there that's wrong. This is the Feast of Tabernacles. That's a wrong slide. So we will go on to paper 161 next time, which is the second part of Rodin's teachings, right? All right. So let's say a little prayer and we'll close for the night. Millie, would you like to close for us tonight?
I'll do the prayer. Yes. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for letting us get together and assemble together again tonight. Help us to learn how Rodan thought through and recognized the teachings of Jesus and took them to heart and incorporated them in what he already believed philosophically, and that he was so impressed. We thank you that he went on to teach others. Help us to take this to heart and go on and teach others also. We thank you for these pages on Rodan, and we anticipate next week's pages also. We thank you for the guidance of our leader here, Roger. We thank you for Jesus having walked on this planet and taught us the way. And we say these things in his name. Jesus, yeah. Amen.
Amen. And thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again. Y'all let me get started without praying tonight.
You just
It's just amazing.
jumped
that
into it.
He took these teachings the disciples gave him and incorporated them with his philosophy
I know.
and turned everything inside out. And, you know, he came up with his own sausage. It's amazing.